From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan. Today with special guest, author and songwriter Paul Zollo. If you've got a tip on anything you find interesting, an unsolved murder, a real-life mystery, new and disturbing ways to recycle old coffee grounds, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's area code 832-847-7837. Or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. And now, here's your host, dialing M for my God, not another severed head, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. You know, producer Mark, I actually have suggestions for old coffee grounds. They make really great fertilizer for roses.
That's a myth.
It's not a myth. I actually used to pick up heavy bags of old coffee grounds from Starbucks. They used to have a program where you could go get like one bag a day for your roses.
I know. They still have that stuff. Like if you go to the real independent, I
can't find them anywhere.
Fairy coffee houses that, with the really smelly hippies behind the counter.
Yeah, I don't hang out there. So we are really blessed today to have a guest, which I'm always so delighted when anyone wants to be a guest, but this is especially exciting for me. So when you're at a holiday party with some friends and your husband mentions to the friends that you're starting a true crime and yoga podcast, and you really have no idea that the person you least suspect is your brother from another alien mother has been right under your nose the whole time, you are so delighted. So Paul Zollo jumps up from his seat and he's like, "Oh my God, Leopold and Loeb." And I'm like, what the fuck is happening here? But so what to say about Paul? I mean, I guess what not to say is really the dilemma. I think if you look up Renaissance Man, right next to that is a picture of Paul. So he is, including but not limited to, first and foremost, a husband and father, a journalist, an author, a singer-songwriter, a music reviewer, a photographer, a lover of clowns, which horrifies me, and a dead person historian. So welcome to Just the Tipster, Paul Zollo.
Thank you very much.
It is such an honor to have you here. So I will be honest with you.
An honor for me, because I love this podcast.
I am so happy to hear that. That makes me more happy than I can tell you. So I will be honest with you. When you said Leopold and Loeb, I was like, oh, that's that singer-songwriter duo from the 30s that had that shitty song called I Ain't Got No Shoes. And then I was like, oh, no, that's not them. That's something else. So I had no idea what sort of a journey you were going to put me on when you said Leopold and Loeb. And I'd actually, heard the name. And then you said, oh, and Clarence Darrow, defended. I was like, what is happening? So I have spent a couple of days researching this, and it is one of the more fascinating fucking things I've ever read in my life. Each detail gets me a little further into the story, and it's fascinating. And I love all of the personal connections that you have to it. That's what makes it even more interesting to me, not just as almost 100-year-old case now. 1924. And here you still have all of these details. I feel like you're one of those, people that are going to keep things like this alive. That
is what I'll do. When
yes.
I'm in the home years from now.
Yes, telling everyone about.
My son was like, "Dad, we've heard about that enough. Let's move into this century, please."
Heard about them.
But I'm so happy you share my interest and enthusiasm for this case.
Love of sociopaths.
Because I'll admit I got obsessed with it. And it was a local connection, and there were a lot of local connections to it when I was in high school, and that attracted me to it. But I'm glad you understand.
I get it with all my heart, and the more I learn about it, the deeper. Mark, I was sitting at my desk and highlighting, and I several times went, "Oh my God!" And Mark's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I'm just reading about Leopold and Loeb." I just couldn't even keep it internally. I had to let it out. It was so fascinating. So
that makes me so happy. So rarely do I get to discuss this with people. But
it's so, I think if you know anything about it, just the surface, which is what I know, how can you not be fascinated? I'm not just a total ghoul who loves murders and dead people. I am absolutely that. But I think the thing that fascinates me the most is the psychopathy, the sociopathic behavior. Mm-hmm. And it cuts across, because I'm a English major, across gender, economic, anyone could be a sociopath. I think it's a little more fascinating, and I hate to sound elitist, but because these are rich motherfuckers who, had maybe they were bored, although I think their brains were so fascinating and developed. I'm like, how did you have time to be bored? And why would you think to do this? Except, let's just start at the beginning. So in May of 1924, these two rich kids students at the University of Chicago. Richard
Loeb had dropped out of Chicago, and then he went to University of Michigan,
right,
where he got in some trouble too.
Absolutely.
So being a nerd, I'll correct every little tiny fact.
That's totally fine. I'm glad. I want to get this correct because I've never said, "Oh, look, this is a really good podcast with no details that are wrong." So Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb met, I guess, at University of Chicago, and then Richard Loeb ended up going to University of Michigan. He got thrown out of University of Chicago. So and another reason that this case fascinates me is teenage boys seem to be very drawn to Friedrich Nietzsche. I don't get it. A kid I dated in high school really walked around with, I don't even remember what is it. I started to say Thus Spake Zarathustra, but I could be wrong. But a Nietzsche book. And I was like, so what do you love about this Nietzsche guy? And the only thing he could tell me is that he wrote God is Dead. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that I probably won't be like all up in that Nietzsche shit. So that nihilistic thing and Nietzsche's version of the Übermensch, the Superman, is what appealed to them, these smart boys who, when you think about it later in life, I mean, they actually had some sort of affection and compassion for each other because they wanted to stay in touch, whether it was just the murder that connected them or they didn't have anyone else smart to talk to but each other. I mean, it's so fascinating to me. So
they had a deep friendship, and just how, what their friendship really was all about is not completely known.
Are sociopaths able to be friends? Because to me, to be a friend, you have to have a heart and a soul, and
right.
I don't know.
Some concept of someone else's reality somewhat.
Yeah.
I think it was more an obsessional attraction between them.
That makes sense, that they understood each other's weirdness. Maybe
I think Leopold, Loeb was very handsome. I think Leopold was really drawn to him.
Okay.
I think he was in love with him.
Now that's interesting. I had not thought about that connection. I guess later on when you think about it, maybe there were a couple of hints that it could have been eros as opposed to agape, or
Well, there's certainly a lot of people that feel that was the heart of it, that they were both homosexuals, and that they had many homosexual encounters with other people,
right.
And that Leopold was madly in love with Loeb.
Now that's fascinating.
That Loeb represented that Superman to him.
The Superman. Oh, okay, all right. Now that,
we're not sure. But as I've been reading it now, I'm kind of opening my mind to maybe I didn't understand that when I was in high school, the true extent of that. But
I get just the little bit that I've read and been fascinated by. That kind of makes sense. Now I hadn't thought about it that way, but that makes sense. So
if I can inject a twisted sexual part to it, I'll do that for you.
That's why you're here. That's
why
basically.
Melissa hates that when that happens.
Yeah, when there's never a sexual component to any sort of sociopathic homicides at all. Never. Sure. So they kidnapped.
Wait, what was Paul going to say?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was what he meant.
Oh, maybe he did. Okay.
Why don't you pipe down in there, sunshine? We don't fucking need you. Shut up.
See, this is the interplay your fans live for. Just what's really going on between these guys.
Our fan, meaning you, just you. So, okay.
Me and my entire imaginary staff listen to this all the time.
All the time. In 1924, these two assholes kidnapped he was 14-year-old boy, Robert Franks, also from a wealthy family. And
actually Loeb's cousin.
I didn't know that.
Distant cousin. And they all lived on the same street. They all lived within in just giant, beautiful mansions.
Which, as a profiler, that's where you would be like, they were young. They were like 18 and 19 or 17, 18, 19. And so they kidnapped this 14-year-old, also wealthy boy. And as a FBI profiler would say, they usually stick within a 3-mile radius. But that's like serial killers. It's not people who like murder somebody because they pissed them off. This is someone who's spent this time and made a plan. And they have obviously made a plan.
Yet it still seemed a little random who they chose, because according to what I read, they didn't decide right away.
Right.
And they all went to the Harvard Boys School, this private, fancy, grammar school.
Right.
and they drove around. They rented a car and drove around.
Yeah.
They weren't even using their own car.
Nope.
And then they saw Bobby Franks, who they knew.
Yeah.
And later there was a comment like, well, if we were going to choose anyone, we'd choose a little snot-nosed brat like him.
Yes. Yes.
They didn't choose a girl. I think that is interesting, too. They never thought of a girl.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is, I hadn't thought about that either. I
See,
thought,
once again.
yeah, the sexual component.
Yes.
Because they had done so much pre-planning without a target picked out. That is also different. I sound like anyway, most serial killers have a target. They figure out who they want, what they want, why they want it. And most of them usually have a type. So having someone pick a young boy, pretty smart. I hadn't thought about that. It was for potentially other reasons, subconscious, that maybe they weren't even aware of. And especially when I found out what I was yelling, oh my God, about was what they did to poor Bobby Franks. So at first, wasn't the plan going to be just to rob him? And then it turns out they started with petty crimes, which a lot of serial killers do, a lot of sociopaths do. Like they didn't do the three, they call the three big ones, enuresis, like bedwetting, fire starting, and torturing animals. And then moving up to like petty theft and vandalism. So they started with petty theft and vandalism. I don't know if they peed the bed.
There were some fires. They did start a fire.
Fascinating.
There were. And you're right. It seemed almost like they were bored. They needed something, exciting. But this seemed to be born from this idea of doing a perfect crime.
Perfect crime, because they're perfect guys.
Yeah, like an abstract intellectual exercise.
Yes.
That's, divorced from reality.
That's exactly, yeah.
Which is sociopathic,
Right.
obviously. But then they thought, the idea was not to rob, but to kidnap, but to murder him too. But we'll make it look like a kidnapping, and we'll get money.
That's it.
And it'll throw them off from the murder. The kidnapping will confuse them. And they had this real confusing kidnap plot and how they were going to get the money and all.
And it turned out to bite him in the ass because a relative who got the phone call got confused about what store he was supposed to meet them at for the next direction. So they ended up having to kind of abandon the plan because nobody was going to be there for the drop. It was very complicated.
Yeah.
In their mind, I'm sure it made perfect sense.
Yeah,
they
it must
were
have been
brilliant.
fun, like writing a detective novel. They were having fun with that, but it was a complex.
So how did they start talking about it?
They met in school, and they and I'm trying to remember which one. They both were tested, and their IQs are very high. Although IQ tests are a little different now.
Leopold was considered a genius, or at least he told everyone that.
Right. Well,
and he said he knew like 7 languages in high school.
Right.
They both went to college really young.
Right.
I think they both started college at 15.
Yes.
And graduated. So by 18 or 19, they had already graduated college, both of them, or at least they were done with college.
Right.
But Leopold was known to be a genius, where Loeb was an athlete and really good looking, but he was really,
really
intelligent
smart too. Yeah.
Leopold was a nerd. He was a real, and he was into, ornithology, like seriously.
Into birds.
Chicks love that, don't they?
No, anyone who I don't want to hurt your feelings, Paul, but anyone who likes birds or clowns, no, it's not happening. Not.
How about clown birds?
No bird clowns, no cloud birds. You're not going to see anyone naked with that. No, not happening.
I understand.
So yeah,
creepy.
They said Nathan Leopold had an IQ of 210, which that's not even a. Tests are different now, so you're not going to get a 210. I'm going to say he's probably a 160. I'm going to knock him down a few notches because 210 is like, but so they meet in school and they find that they both love things like detective novels, which I liked that as a kid too, but I didn't grow up to kill a little boy as far as you people know. So they're obsessed with Nietzsche's writings on the Übermensch and the perfect crime. And they get poor little Bobby Franks in the back of a rented car. I'd never rented a car until I was probably 30. It would never dawn on me.
They had a lot of money. And that's
probably why.
A beautiful Willis night. These were huge. These were like little hotel rooms, these cars, with curtains and candles. They're beautiful.
Yeah, and there was...
But, they had to because Leopold had a chauffeur and the guy that took care of the cars.
Yep.
So you got to be careful what that guy sees.
He ended up kind of outing them a little bit.
Yeah.
He ended up talking to the cops saying, that didn't happen that way.
For a perfect crime, they were pretty sloppy, as murderers often are.
Sometimes, especially since this was their first.
Right. They might have gotten better had they other opportunities.
Yeah, they may have evolved.
Right.
So this poor little Bobby Franks.
They rented a car. I just keep interrupting you. This is one reason my wife loves me so much.
Yeah, I can't blame her.
they saw Bobby and they tried to convince him to get in the car. He's like, no, I don't want to.
It's only like a block from my house.
He didn't want to. I
don't want to ride with you fuckers.
He didn't want to get in.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I want to talk to you about that tennis racket because he just had,
Yep.
these rich kids are always playing tennis, okay. So for the tennis racket, he got in. But to this day, we're not sure who was. One was in the back seat, one was in the front seat.
Yeah, different accounts.
They're kind of lying about.
Yeah.
One of them's lying. Obviously.
Right. And one of them is holding him down and abusing him in the back seat, and the other one's driving. And yeah, so I love that they rented the car under the name Morton D Ballard. I love that. At another point, they use the name Johnson, which is hilarious because I think everyone uses. It's like when you're caught by the cop, what's your name? Like Johnson. That's just the name. I just love.
Johnson
love that.
and Johnson.
Just Johnson.
Of all names, Johnson. It's a significant name.
For I guess what they had planned, perhaps. Yes.
Yes.
So they bound him and gagged him and beat him up, and he's in the back seat.
Well, what they did, let's keep interrupting.
Please.
Tell me not to. But
you
they had
know all
a
the
chisel
details.
wrapped up. And the idea at first, Loeb said, Leopold was going to use ether and just kind of like knock him out. Mm-hmm. But instead, one of them, I think it was Loeb, started hitting him, but hit him too hard and pretty much, cracked his skull open.
Yes.
But that wasn't the idea. So suddenly there's blood
Right.
and everything all over the place.
Yeah, all over the rental car.
He got kind of excited, I think, Loeb,
Yeah.
and he hit him really hard.
Yeah, with a chisel.
Well, Bobby must have been screaming as children will do when you do that.
Yeah,
to them.
14-year-old. Yeah, if you're going to...
probably making a racket,
Yeah, with his racket. So they drive, it's like 25 miles south of Chicago to Indiana.
Yeah, to
because
another
if you're gonna drop a body, Indiana is the place. You don't want to do that in Chicago,
Right?
Like where you live, you want to 25 miles in Shittsville, Indiana. Sorry, Hammond, Indiana, Wolf Lake. So this is their predetermined dumping spot. So after nightfall, they take him and dump him, and they discard and remove his clothing. Mm-hmm. They try to conceal his body in a culvert. Didn't really conceal it too well along the railroad tracks. And to obscure his identification, this was the part I thought was like, holy shit, you kids.
Yes.
I mean, these are two kids under 20. Mm-hmm. They pour hydrochloric acid on his face, a distinctive scar on his abdomen. That's smart. Now you'd have to try and cut off people's tattoos. But now, you know he has got a scar, so you cut that off. And then you pour hydrochloric acid on his genitals, which I thought they said it was to obscure the fact that he had been circumcised. But now what you're saying, the whole, perhaps sexual undertone, that makes more sense.
It makes you wonder, because that part about the acid on the genitals,
Mm-hmm.
that was not in all the accounts I read. That's something I've read recently.
Right.
And that idea that they did it to obscure that they were, that he was Jewish. Mm-hmm. Really? Was that their main concern at that moment?
Right. His
that they wanted to
religion?
hide that who he was?
Right,
That
right.
doesn't really add up to me.
Yeah, his face. That makes more sense now. What you're saying makes sense, because I thought, oh, okay, his face, I get it. And the abdominal scar, I'm like, that's fucking smart. I mean, not everyone maybe had appendicitis or whatever, who knows? That's very smart to get rid of specific scars. And the part that I screamed, oh my God, was the genitals.
Me too. And
was
I'm
like-
doing that, like you say, to do that to.
Yeah, it's like, huh.
That's quite a
probably
cold-hearted
not-
thing to do.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question before we go any further?
No. I'm kidding. Go on.
Oh, thank you. So I just want to make sure. So they killed Bobby in the car.
He probably died in the car. I mean, he was dying, if not dead, in the back of the car, yes.
And died on the way to Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Or okay. I just want to make sure that
Indiana.
Yeah, they didn't intend to kill him right away, but he hit him really hard, and he was bleeding profusely in the car. And that's
What
what
was the
killed him.
original plan?
Well, to enact the perfect crime, that because they were supermen, they were Ubermensch, and they were obsessed with perfecting having the perfect crime, not be caught, go unsolved, nothing to trace back to them, and they kind of fucked up like every step of the way. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were seen, with Bobby Franks in the back of the car.
Yeah,
that's number one.
And he was missing. And he was from a rich family. I mean, right away, everyone's looking for Bobby Franks.
Right.
As soon as they found the body, they knew it was him.
Right.
I mean, that didn't keep them from identifying him in any way.
Right. Yeah, even with the hydrochloric acid on his hoo-hoo.
Even that.
And one of them dropped their glasses.
Leopold
dropped his
He was
glasses.
the bespectacled nerd guy, Leopold.
Leopold left them at the scene.
Yeah.
And they were so highfalutin and unique. There were only 3 pairs of those glasses sold in the city of Chicago.
Right.
And one was to Nathan Leopold.
Yeah, there's so many, I'm self-obsessed, so I just think of all the connections to my life. But 1924, it happened. That was the year my dad was born in Chicago.
All right.
But also, the glasses were from Elmer Co. We grew up, Elmer Co. was the place everyone got your glasses.
Uh-huh.
And to this day, they were Elmer Co. So it was very easy to identify them.
Right.
But kind of stupid to drop your glasses. I mean, if you're doing the perfect crime,
Right.
that's kind of sloppy.
Wouldn't you, if you wear glasses, wouldn't you be like, oh, I mean, like, how do you leave? It'd be like, oh, I dropped my keys.
Yeah.
I would think you'd be like, there's something missing from what typically rests on my face.
Right.
You would think.
I was thinking maybe he
shit.
didn't wear them all the time. Maybe he wore them for certain things.
And it was nighttime when they dropped them. Maybe.
He did claim that he would wear them for bird watching, and then that was his ultimate alibi that I dropped him there while bird watching
That's right.
at a different
That's what he
time.
said. Exactly.
So maybe he wore them for distance and not all the time.
Yeah.
But generally, when you saw photos of him, he did have glasses on.
Glasses on, you're right. Yeah. Pretty fascinating. Pretty fascinating
Pretty
stuff.
sloppy.
So quickly, they, get to be arrested. They
before you go to that, they go out for dinner right
Yes, they
after
do.
this. They go to a diner. This is cold-hearted stuff. After pouring the acid, you get an appetite. Let's go have a tuna melt
Yeah, I'm
now
hungry.
or something.
And they played cards. They spent some time playing cards. They tried to clean up the blood from the rented car's upholstery the best they could. And Leopold...
And of course, the chauffeur noticed that.
Yeah.
Because they've never done any cleaning,
in their life.
What is he cleaning a car?
Right. What's
Why?
happening?
It's not even his own car. What is going on here? That was very suspicious.
That's hilarious. Mr. Chauffeur, where's the Lysol? I know I live here, but I don't know where the clean. I don't know where you people do your stuff.
If you shot a deer in the back of your car and you were going to clean it,
let's just say a really big bloody deer the size of a small 14-year-old boy. How would you clean that up? Let's just say.
Wait, so I just want to make clear on the chauffeur thing. The chauffeur didn't drive them when they were killing the guy.
No, they didn't use the chauffeur car. They rented a car.
So the chauffeur's kind of looking on going, well, why did they rent a car? I usually drive them
Right,
around.
okay. Right, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, he sometimes did use the car, but then the chauffeur took care of the car and would clean it.
Clean it.
They never cleaned their own car ever, of course.
So that night, Nathan Leopold calls Bobby Frank's mother and calls himself George Johnson. Here's the Johnson thing again. And told her that, Bobby Franks had been kidnapped. Instructions to deliver the ransom would follow. They typed the ransom note on a typewriter stolen from the college, which is really, really smart too. And then ditched the typewriter. Was it in a lake? They ditched it.
Yeah, like in a lagoon.
A lagoon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
not exactly the ocean. Again, a great place to throw it, huh? Come on, guys.
Yeah, it's not going to be
This is
carried
a genius,
out by,
supposedly,
right? Exactly.
right?
Yeah, really. 210, my asshole. So they
and that we're mentioning that because that got found. They found the typewriter.
Yep. I was going to say they really kind of fucked up they aren't really the Ubermensch, are they?
But those Chicago cops were on it, weren't they?
At the time. I don't know where they are now.
Yeah, they're just busy beating people up right now.
The murder capital of the world. Yeah.
My hometown. Hi, everyone.
So, let's see. The body was found by a guy named Tony Minky, and it was found pretty quickly. They thought it would be hidden forever, and that did not work out well.
No.
So
it was found within a day.
Within a day.
They didn't cover it clearly very well, or put it even in a place where people won't find it. Obviously.
Yeah, Tony Minky. I mean, I bet his IQ ain't 210, and he still found poor little Bobby Franks with no face, no Johnson, and no scar, all burnt off. So, all right. So, you want to say anything before we get to their arrest?
The thing about it that was really terrible and stupid of them also was that they were so fascinated in it that they were constantly talking to everyone. Did you hear about this? What do you think happened?
Yeah.
Even to the cops, and they were
I think
offering
this
theories.
happened. Yeah. And the quote you had about, if somebody had to be kidnapped, it should have been that fucking little Bobby Frank son of a bitch.
Exactly.
Snobby
this
bastard.
Is like pre-OJ, like, if I did do it, this was what I would have done. I didn't, but if I were.
Right. If someone had to get kidnapped, that little fucker, he was ripe for it. I mean, can you blame him?
Yeah.
And then burning off his Hulu.
Yeah, who wouldn't do that?
Right. Right.
We're stuck on that aspect, aren't we?
I am a little bit.
I am too.
So
it was the Jackson Park Lagoon.
Yeah, the Jackson Park Lagoon on June 7th. So yeah, it was found like a month after, not even a month, a couple weeks after they killed the poor little thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes,
I love that their alibi is that they picked up two women, which goes back to I never I never made the connection. There's probably a whole lot of, homosexual love underneath going on there. They picked up two women named Edna and May.
I love those names.
I do too.
Edna and May. We don't know last names, but they're Edna and May.
We know for sure it was Edna and May. And we fucking laid pipe for hours. Those women can't walk. I'm pretty sure they walk funny, and they didn't even charge us anything because we are so fucking awesome. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to go home.
I always got a feeling this was Loeb's idea. Like, we're going to make up that we're with women,
right?
Okay, because if we're going to make up something, let's have women part of it,
right?
Okay, and I could see Leopold. Okay, how about Edna and May? What do you think of those names? But then they claim they just dropped them off near a golf course and never learned their last name.
Right.
What?
That was after just drilling them into the ground.
Those guys, they just go out and meet girls and do that.
Pick them up, yeah.
Yeah, that's what they were doing.
Because they have their ornithology, rap. The
Right.
chicks are like,
yeah.
You like the double-breasted blue bill?
Right.
Yes.
No one can resist that.
No, I know. Beady little eyes and pointed.
They'll probably encourage them. Talk about the birds, Nate. Let them know about the birds. I love that.
Tell them about the birds. Their panties are dropping right now.
Show them how big your binoculars are.
Those glasses that you drop while bird watching. Those big, giant, thick.
So I'm glad you celebrate all the twisted aspects. And a lot of people want to just jump right over.
Just go right. No,
Edna and May, I think, are the key parts of
I
the
think so, too.
story.
I think if you remember nothing else in life, Edna and May. If
May.
you need an alibi, just say Edna and May. It's all uphill from there.
Never learned their last names.
It's going to be
That's
great.
just how I
Why
am.
do you need that? No, they are lovers. They don't need a last name. You don't call someone by their first and last name when you're making sweet, sweet love to their, buttholes or whatever it is that you think you're doing because you're a fucking weirdo. So their alibi was blown apart by Leopold's chauffeur, who said, the car was in the garage all night. They couldn't have picked up Edna and May. That couldn't, not that those people don't exist, but that couldn't happen. So
I also love that instead of taking him, when they were arrested, they didn't take them to the cops. They took them to the Drake Hotel in Chicago.
Sure.
Which I also grew up in, because if you drive into the city, on the outer drive, as it's called now, that's the big hotel. Now the Hancock building, which is over 100 feet, is right behind it.
Right.
But then it was it, and it was just gleaming.
Right.
And there was this club, the International Club, the greatest restaurant in town that my dad belonged to.
Right.
So we went there, and I found out they took him to the Drake to question him because they knew they'd be more comfortable there.
Of course.
They were smart.
Down at headquarters.
Right, I was scared of these guys.
These rich kids don't deserve headquarters.
And just like they always do, as you know, they both took, they took him separately and said, he already confessed, so you might as well tell us.
Well, Loeb cracked first, right?
I believe so. That's right.
Loeb confessed.
Yeah.
He said Leopold planned everything, that he had killed, Bobby Franks in the back. Mm-hmm. Loeb drove. Mm-hmm. Leopold said, I was driving, Loeb's in the back. Mm-hmm. So I love that. Now, this is the quote.
They turn on each other immediately.
Immediately.
At that point. Yeah.
Immediately, which I love. Okay, so I apparently after after Loeb died, Leopold admitted to killing Franks. Now, is this a word for mommy?
Momsy?
Yeah.
Yeah, you found this too.
Yeah, Momsy feels less terrible than she might thinking you did it, he quotes Loeb as saying. And I'm not going to take that shred of comfort away from her. Momsy.
I think that's a word a really strange, twisted, wealthy child might come up for mommy. Momsy.
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 Mompsie.
Feels less terrible.
Yeah.
Thinking you did it.
Yeah. Momsy.
But that's Leopold quoting Loeb, that Loeb said that.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess they're just going to turn on each other in life and death, whatever.
It always seemed to me that Loeb would be the guy to do it. Because he just was the stronger athlete guy.
Right.
And Leopold is so in his head. He just doesn't
In his
seem
head.
like.
That's it.
And Loeb was strong, so.
That makes I hadn't really thought of it, and I thought I would never know who did it, and maybe we never will. But that makes I see what you're saying, and that makes more sense to me now. It does make when you're trying to figure out when people are pointing fingers at each other.
And this was Loeb's nephew. He knew. I mean, not cousin. He knew Bobby Franks. Leopold didn't really know him. Wow. He chose him. He called him the snot-nosed brat.
Right.
Seems to me he'd be the guy to smash him.
Have you ever thought about being like an FBI profiler?
Yeah.
Because
I'd like to be a gumshoe, but in the 40s, though, is really where I want to do it. Around 30s.
So time traveler and gumshoe.
Yeah. I still dress like that. As
you do.
Yeah.
You actually are very dapper today. I love the fedora and I love the jacket.
Elbow patches.
Oh,
even,
the patches. Very collegiate. I like it a lot.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
So now they're
Momsy.
arrested.
Do you mind if I call you Momsy for the rest of the show?
I pretty much do. So no, don't do that anymore.
I
That's
won't.
horrifying. Only if you're pulling my hair. If you're pulling my hair, you can call me Momsy.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Hey.
Uh-oh, producer Mark heard that. Never mind. We'll delete that out later. So here's what happens when you're rich and you get the OJ dream team of the 1920s. Motherfucking Clarence Darrow. God damn. I am blown away by his 12. I mean, okay, so he was very smart as an attorney. He figured a jury trial, those rich fuckers would be convicted immediately. So he just said, all right, let's do a sentencing hearing. We're going to have them admitted.
No, what it is not only would they be convicted, but they'd be executed.
Right.
That a jury without it, that's all anyone wanted. Just hang them immediately.
Right.
We need a trial, just hang those assholes.
Right.
And everyone wanted that.
Right.
Even the Jewish community. Come on. Just hang them, please.
Yeah.
Get it over with. But
Yeah.
but he knew that if he went to if he pleads guilty, they're not going to go to a jury. Then it's up to the judge to decide. And he thought he'd have more luck convincing one guy than 12 guys to spare their lives.
Holy
which was really
shit.
his whole point. Never to prove they were innocent. He didn't even try that.
No. But after reading, obviously in a very abridged version of his 12-hour closing argument during the sentencing hearing, I found myself like, oh, and I'm like, no, you can't. No, do not have empathy for these fuckers. I mean, Clarence Darrow they said it was his, most impassioned and best closing argument ever. And holy shit, I think I agree. It's beautiful. It's poetic on its own, but then he quotes several, a Persian Sufi poet, and all about love. And it's amazing. He blames not only Nietzsche, he blames the recently ended war.
Exactly.
It is amazing.
Yeah. He was quite a brilliant guy and an amazing speaker and such an eloquent, poetic speaker, and also so philosophical.
Yes.
But to do 12 hours.
Right.
It's because Darrow, he was already rather famous at the time. He did the
Right.
Scopes trial,
Right.
which was about evolution, if you can teach evolution.
Absolutely.
And so he was really taking on what he saw as the moral, crux issues of the day. And this was the 1920s. It's like, this was modern times. Who knows? Like, everyone thought, who knows what's going to happen? Like, the world's probably going to end. Everything's going so crazy,
Right.
And even this, people saw like this is proof that overeducated is bad. These college kids, look what happens.
Right.
So there's a lot of fear. But he was like a real moral, ethical guy, and he really was impassioned that capital punishment was not effective. It wasn't a punishment; it was retribution.
Exactly.
Which goes against the American spirit. And so he really, expounded on that and our thoughts of death and how it's okay to go kill people in war.
Right.
I just read parts of it yesterday, and I was kind of blown away by
I was too.
the depth of
Yes.
the thing. It was quite amazing.
Yeah, there's
Better than Johnny Cochran, I thought.
So I think a little bit. There wasn't even like a glove that didn't fit or some ugly ass Reno Molly shoes.
Though some props, I think, are good. There were no props.
Here's some broken glasses. Some shit like that.
Here's Edna and May.
They don't exist. They're blow-up dolls. And they have penises. Oh my God, that's so weird. Here's a chisel. It's not important at all. The one pulled right out of Bobby Frank's skull. Just not important at all. So yeah, Clarence Darrow, oh my God. When I was reading it, I was like, this is amazing. It's basically saying, if you put these two boys to death, you're no better than they are.
Right.
And he says, you are, I'm not saying that they should be out in society. I don't know if they ever will. But he also threw in for good measure, they're very young. Perhaps they could be paroled when they're their next stage of life in their 40s or 50s when, men are more reasonable. And I'm like, fucker, I know a bunch of 40 and 50-year-old men. They ain't more reasonable. That's dumb. They're, and especially if you're a sociopath.
That was the one part of that I felt too was no.
Right, yeah.
And he shouldn't have said that. Because I thought basically his whole point of view is very enlightened, especially for 1924.
It really is.
We're still not there, obviously,
exactly.
as you know, and a lot of people, I think you agree that the capital punishment is a good idea. But back then he was saying why it's not a good idea. Not just not in this instance, but it's not good for society. And I tend to subscribe to that. If we keep saying, actually killing is a good solution, but don't kill anyone. But if you do, we're going to kill you. It's a confusing message. It's a mixed message.
It's very confusing. And I will tell you one thing. I was a firm believer in capital punishment until I married Mark Humphreys.
Whoa.
And he is not.
That guy's a dick.
I hate that fucking guy, producer Mark. He feels that there is way too much of a chance of the wrong person being murdered. And we know that's true. Now we know that's true. And I was like, if that guy is found guilty by a jury of his peers, and he killed that guy, he should be killed too. I'm eye for an eye. And for the last 20 years of my life, I'm like, oh, no.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I am now.
That might could have a good effect on your life.
I know, isn't that crazy?
I figure that might be possible.
Who would have thought
that? Pretty smart
guy.
But you have said many things on these shows, like about these people you've talked about, like let's just murder them immediately.
Well,
it seemed to me that's what you wanted.
Gene Simmons, who kills 14 members of his family in different ways, shooting, strangling, and drowning in a rain barrel. Children.
Including the children. Yeah.
So
that was a good episode.
I thought, thank you.
I like that one.
I thought, what if they killed him 14 times?
Right.
Like strangle him, he comes back to life, strangle him again. So he experiences 14 deaths. I know that's really Stone Age shit. But sometimes when you read these people who wake up in a bad mood and slaughter a bunch of people, that's when it comes back to me like, so if there's a question, if the person didn't say I did it and there's video of me running around shooting everyone, that's when I think the death penalty can be, but that's another show. Right. But yeah, so these guys, I'm glad that they didn't get the death penalty only because the story could then be extended.
Mm-hmm. And the truth is, Darrow was so impassioned and so eloquent, but ultimately the judge came and said it's primarily that they were so young. He just felt like at 18 and 19 that they were too young, and Darrow was frankly disappointed. It's like
that was
after all that, how about all that great stuff I said for 12 hours? How about that? But
so you probably know what this section is about because I do not know who Houseman is. He says Clarence Darrow quotes this stanza from Houseman.
Oh, famous poet.
Okay, I don't know the first name. I don't know. Maybe his first name is Edna or May. I don't know. But but it's so beautiful.
Yes.
Now hollow fires burn out to black and lights are fluttering low. Square your shoulders, lift your pack and leave your friends and go. Oh, never fear, lads, naughts to dread. Look not left nor right. And all the endless road you tread, there's nothing but the night. And then the next verse is, breathe deep the gathering gloom, watch lights fade from... No, I'm kidding. That's not it. That's...
I was just saying that's so better than...
Paul's like a scholar on songwriters. He's like, wait a minute. Hold on a second.
I was thinking Trump had that beautiful poem about the snake that he recited the other day. I think this is so much better.
Better than that? Yeah,
I
think that's
poem
too.
by our current president. I think we've devolved in some ways, but... That just shows the level that they were at. I mean, he was reading that.
Yeah. And I loved, toward the end, he quotes a Persian Sufi poet, Omar Khayyam. So I be written in the book of love. I do not care about that book above. Erase my name or write it as you will. So I will be written in the book of love. So he was, using his impassioned theory about if we have the capacity to love, we can't possibly hang these two boys who burned off another kid's Johnson.
Right.
We just can't do that.
And this was 1924 when they were still hanging people, and not with a lot, not a lot of delay from murder to hanging. Usually,
right.
It was a pretty quick thing.
Wow.
And that's a brutal way,
yeah.
I mean, not that there's nice ways to kill people, but they've tried.
Yeah.
Like lethal injection, less brutal.
Didn't they use the electric chair in Illinois?
Back then to stop a hanging.
Would it have been a hanging in Illinois? I thought it was the electric chair. Oh, okay.
It would have been. It would have been a hanging. It definitely would have been a hanging.
And pretty much everyone wanted them to hang.
I think the electric chair is far more exciting if you're going to kill somebody.
But, yeah, they didn't have that yet, though. But they brought it in soon.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's much more.
With the sparks, the pyrotechnics.
What the fuck is wrong with you two?
Us? You invited us to this party.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, what the fuck is wrong with you two?
Suddenly, I guess we crossed the line.
Okay, now we know where it is. Okay.
You guys are fucking monsters.
Right.
All right, so both men get life plus 99 years.
Yeah.
The kidnapping for 99 years, life for the murder.
Right.
Less than a month after Loeb's father died of heart failure, probably because he raised a monster son who burns kids' Johnsons off.
Darrow thought that was a very extreme sentence. You didn't expect that. Life plus 99 pretty much is saying you're never going to get out of jail.
And yet we know.
Mm-hmm.
One gets out one way, not the way you want to go, and one gets out the other way and doesn't last much longer. But so they're at Joliet prison, which is, the only thing I know about that is from the Blues Brothers. So I know nothing, although it doesn't sound like it's a lot of fun.
Joliet's very close to Chicago, and there's a famous charm school in Joliet. And there's the prison and the charm school.
I don't think they went there. I don't think they went to the charm school. So they kept their friendship, and then they were, Leopold was transferred to Statesville. Mm-hmm. And then Loeb gets transferred there too. And they reunited again. I hate to say this, but they actually did some good shit. They expanded the prison school system. They added high school and junior college curriculums because, they were both probably smart enough to fucking teach, I would guess. And then in 1938, Loeb is murdered in the prison.
I think it's 36, isn't it?
Oh, 36? You're right. January of 36. Please feel free to correct me. As I said, I'm really not
so only
the arbiter of details.
Only 12 years passed. They've been in jail 12 years.
And the theory is that he was murdered by another cellmate, James Day, because he had been able to pay Day off to not beat him up because he was a rich kid and he was getting money transferred all the time. And then they cut the money down to $5 a week.
Yeah, at first, since they came from rich families, everyone assumed they had lots of money.
Right.
And that got cut off, so they didn't.
Right.
But people, of course, didn't believe them.
Right.
But there was more to that. I mean, one of the thoughts was that Loeb was coming on to Day home, in a homosexual way. But then the other people said that Day was coming on to Loeb.
Right.
And that Loeb was resisting him.
Right. Yeah, maybe he wasn't his type. Maybe he wasn't, the handsome Leopold type or whatever. Or maybe he didn't like boys. I don't know. But yeah, so he is sliced over 50 times with a razor.
In the shower.
Yeah. And he said, he was coming on to me. Well, except that he had absolutely no wounds at all, no defensive wounds or anything.
Right.
And poor Loeb is, his arms are cut up, which now we know defensive wounds. And his throat was cut from behind.
Right. So that kind of shows the guy came up and...
probably a blitz attack. And and
over 50 knife wounds. Right. Or
50.
Straight razor.
50, yeah. Now, the part I thought was pretty fascinating was that Leopold fights his way to the hospital, the infirmary, and, the last thing Loeb says is, I think I'm going to make it. And Leopold washes his body as an act of affection. Yeah,
that's another one of those odd details, isn't it?
It's an interesting
So he must have made, do you mind if I wash the body? I'm a friend and we have a history.
Yeah,
please do.
We killed a little boy and burned his Johnson off. I'm wondering.
Please, let's leave him alone with the body for a few hours. What is that?
Well,
wash the body.
I just all I can think of is Mary Magdalene washing, Jesus's feet or something. I mean, maybe Edna and May were busy. And so Leopold had to take on the act of body washing his dead friend with 50 slices. And they do have that history. They did that work together, back in the 20s. So he then Leopold then becomes a model prisoner.
You have to remember what the Daily News wrote, the Chicago Daily News, which I grew up. Back in my day, we had like the morning paper and the evening paper.
Right.
And the Tribune was in the morning, and then at night, the Daily News. And the Daily News, back then when they had kind of a sense of humor in reporting, some people were saying that because Loeb came on to him. That was the general thought in the streets.
Right.
Loeb was, trying to get him sexually, and he got killed. That the guy wrote... Richard Loeb, despite his erudition, today ended his sentence with a proposition.
Oh my
pretty
God,
nerdy humor.
That's pithy.
But that's back in 1936. That was some good stuff.
That's pretty pithy.
Keep in mind, this is before TMZ or Entertainment Tonight. Keep in mind.
Harvey Levin had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, that's what they said.
Which is frightening and yet beautiful at the same time. So Leopold becomes a model prisoner, and even though he's, kind of a monster, he volunteered for a malaria study. So he was injected with, malaria, inoculated with malaria pathogens. And I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know if he got paid or just wanted something to do. Maybe he just wanted to die. I don't know. They said he went through some depression. But so how does he get paroled?
That was a question I had too. It's hard to believe, and I am firmly not someone that believes in the capital punishment. But we got to keep the murderers in jail. I mean, that is the best reason to kill people. That if they get out,
right?
I think if you kill someone, you should never get out,
right?
And frankly, I think life plus 99 years. If you have to be in jail for decades, that's worse than getting killed. In some ways, at least it's over. I mean, the death and all that's not that fun, but
you don't know. It might be.
That's you're right. It might be great.
Yeah, we don't know.
I tend to think maybe not, but
right.
Depends who you are. Yeah. But he hired this guy Elmer Gertz, and like I said, there were many connections to my self-obsessed life. And Elmer Gertz was a friend of my dad's.
Right.
So when I was in high school and I got obsessed with this, and I started to do an independent study where I got to write about it. And I just spent all my time thinking about this. And I went to the houses and walked around smoking a cigar and looked at the ruins. They still have the ruins of Leopold's house is still there.
Wow, because it was a mansion.
Yeah, they never, I guess the Loeb house is still there, and Bobby Franks' house got demolished and something else put there. But the Leopold house is still in ruins, oddly, which was great. I took pictures and all.
Of course.
But Elmer Gertz was a friend of my father's and was Leopold's parole, a lawyer. A really good lawyer, just like getting Darrow. They got the best parole lawyer you could get. And it was a long time, but they were saying like the malaria thing and that Leopold, he was a crazy youth then, and he was under the influence of, of Dick Loeb. And, and I
like that you use the word Dick.
Well, did you? I was thinking of you using that word because when Leopold actually wrote his book, he said if he had to name his motive, what it was. Did you see that quote?
No.
He said, if I had to name my motive, if there was one, I guess I would say I just wanted to please Dick. Doesn't that sum it all up? He just wanted to please Dick.
That's it. That's pretty much the bottom line right there.
Just want to please Dick.
I think a lot of people would say that at the end of their lives. I'm just saying.
Producer Mark said he thinks a lot of people would want to say that at the end of their lives, that they just want to please Dick.
Yeah.
So all of the things that are attributed to this case, like the book and then movie Compulsion.
Yeah, by Meyer Levin.
Yeah. I mean, not Harvey Levin, Meyer Levin.
Right.
Yeah.
Meyer Levin, who also worked on the Anne Frank diary. That's also what he did.
Wow. So he kind of changes Leopold's name to a pseudonym, but Leopold's like, well, it's basically, you've put me out there. And so he writes his own book.
Yeah. I mean, Leopold moves to Puerto Rico, of all places.
Right.
I've never seen an explanation of why. Why Puerto Rico? But
well, maybe he feels like he wouldn't be as known. I know he got married again.
Yeah, he gets married. And he wrote a book called Life Plus 99 Years.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said he wanted to use the proceeds. What did he say he wanted to use them for? Something really good. And it was so fascinating as this was called the crime of the century at the time.
Right.
Even after like Sacco and Vanzetti and
right.
I mean
it's pretty early in the century. The crime of the century.
1924, crime of the century.
Yeah. And that really drew me to it because when I was a kid, it's like, that was the crime of the century? I probably discovered this in the 70s. And I thought even then that was kind of, interesting that they would think there'd never be a greater crime. Clearly it shows what a spectacle it was and how people were, people were kind of blown away by the whole thing.
It was, I mean, the horror of it, the terrible things they did, and all of the components, the money, the amazing, Clarence Darrow, the weird details. I don't know how many hydrochloric acid murders there had been before that. And when they basically say, it was just an experiment to see if we could, their mindset, I think, is what made it. There are a lot of old crimes. So when you told me you were fascinated by this one, I was like, I don't know. Am I going to be interested in something this old? And from the minute I started reading about it, I was like, oh my God, I see why Paul's obsessed.
Yeah, even old murders can be really good ones.
Yeah, they don't all have to be new.
Yeah, but I think that's the crux of it. And the thing I think about when I listen to all your podcasts, afterwards, it's like, well, why?
Right.
Like that Gene Simmons,
Exactly.
not the Kiss guy, by the way.
Yeah, not
Though I think
Paul
he
Stanley.
is a murderer too.
Yeah, I think so
but
too.
Not that guy. But no, he's not. But why? What would lead? And this one, I really think is hard to really fathom. Even if that's true that we were under the influence of Nietzsche, and I mean, Leopold made this statement like it was no different than like an entomologist with a bug.
With a bug, putting a pin in a bug.
It is different when
It's
you're pouring
very
the
different.
hydrochloric acid on.
Yeah,
It is
different. Well, when you see, or if you're able to even look in their eyes, I'm fascinated by the fact that it's like you're seeing the light go out in someone's eyes.
Yes.
You're seeing.
And they were from the same neighborhood, the same community. They knew the impact it would have on the community, the parents.
I don't think they cared.
Clearly.
Right.
That I think is the hardest part to understand. What drew me to is like, how could you not care?
And
what could lead your brain to that? Because they weren't abused as children.
Right.
So how did their brains get that twisted? That was okay?
There's the whole nurture versus nature. Are sociopaths born or are they developed? I think they're probably born. I don't know if there's so many studies done on the brain, posthumously, serial killers who let scientists look at their, there's like the hypothalamus and differences in the limbic region where you're constantly, getting a pleasure center, hit or something. I mean, that's the fascinating part to me is the psychopathy and the fact that these two brilliant boys were so close together and teamed up to do what they thought was the perfect crime. You figure there's within a 3-mile radius, you're going to hope there's maybe 1 to 2 sociopaths.
Right.
But down the street, same school, same ideas, same love of XYZ, these two boys come together. I mean, serial killer teams, pretty rare. Most of them are narcissistic enough they want to do their own kind of thing. So teams are another fascination.
Yeah, that is part of it. It's almost easier. It is easier to understand that one of them could be that twisted, to have no conscience about the thing or concept of the reality or the impact, but that they both could.
Yeah.
But I've thought about it a lot. I think they did for different reasons. I think part of Leopold's was a love of Loeb and to do
wanting to please him.
anything that Loeb wanted to do.
I just want to do anything to please Dick, or whatever the quote was. Yeah.
But was Loeb that sociopathic that he didn't know, that maybe he was, it's hard to
I know it is so hard to imagine because we're not that. But it is still fascinating to try and imagine it. So before we get to his eventual death later on, is there anything you wanted anything I've forgotten? Because I feel like his death is even more fascinating. So he wrote like a book about the birds in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And
he got, after he, I guess he was in for about 33 years and he got paroled in 1958, the year of my birth. Once again, my connection
always
to it.
connection to Paul.
Right. And then moved to Puerto Rico and was studying a lot about birds, and he got married.
He married a widowed florist.
Right.
And apparently stayed married until he died.
Yes. I wonder what that courtship was like. I've thought about that.
Yeah, that'd be good. I think maybe because
want to hear about my childhood adventures?
I will talk to you about anything that happened after the age of 20. Before then, it's all a blur. It's a blank. I don't know anything that happened.
I'll do anything for you, darling. Just don't ask me to clean the car.
I'm not going to clean the car out if I've killed another deer in the back.
And he kept studying. He got a master's degree at the University of Puerto Rico, became a researcher.
Yep. Research on leprosy.
On leprosy.
Amazing. I mean, really.
He was busy.
He was very busy.
Yeah.
But here's the part I think is really fascinating. In 1971... he dies of a diabetes-related heart attack at the age of 66, and his corneas were donated. So he is such a giver that he gives his fucking crazy corneas to some poor person who needs them. And now I wonder if that person has sociopathic, psychopathic corneas.
Right. That'd be a good
Like
Twilight Zone.
how do they see life out of, Loeb's corneas or Leopold's corneas?
Yeah. How do they see little boys?
Right.
Yeah. I don't want to go there.
Genitals, right? I would love to know who
I
got
think that was exactly
corneas.
how he thought of himself. That, as he described in his book, that was just something a crazy youth did.
Yeah.
Like something you do, like, jumping off,
a trampoline.
Yeah, no, that's not just what a crazy youth. I did some crazy things. Never murdered anyone.
Right. Not once that
Not
you
even
want to talk about? Just
I
a little?
did consider murder, but
Right.
not really seriously.
And that's the thing. I think we've all considered murder.
Yeah. Or even the idea like plotting one out,
Right.
how would you do it? But to actually go forth
Yeah.
and
That's what separates us from the monsters is impulse control. I really do believe that's what
Exactly.
separates us from the monsters, because we've all thought about killing someone. I mean, what time is it? It's like almost noon, and I've probably got 3 people on a list right now. So I think we've all thought about it. But yeah, I don't know that one can separate their psyche enough to say, when I was a kid, I stole a car and went on a joyride. I, knocked over a newspaper stand and all the newspapers went in the gutter. Oh, and I killed a 14-year-old boy.
Right.
I don't.
and poured acid on him.
Yeah, and poured hydrochloric acid on his face, abdomen scar, and genitals. That's not. I don't know. I don't know that one can pass that off, no matter what Clarence Darrow said. That we all should come from a place of love.
Right.
I don't know.
And I think that's another reason it's such a fascinating thing, because as you mentioned, I think in your first episode, the reasons why people kill each other, they're often pretty similar. There's money, romance, passion. There's usually a good reason to kill that person. They didn't have any reason to kill this guy. It was
right.
random.
Yeah.
And that aspect of it just makes it even harder to conceive.
The
because
randomness,
I think
you're
as
right.
humans, I could understand killing someone for a good
Right.
reason if they screw you over. Or
Right.
for
Revenge.
Revenge,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
This wasn't that
No.
at all.
No. But yeah, Bobby Franks didn't have a nicer tennis racket than they did. They could all afford the same level tennis racket. Yeah, and then, to try and cast aspersions on poor little Bobby Franks. Well, if, somebody had to be kidnapped and murdered, it should be that little snot-nosed, snobby Bobby. I mean,
Yeah.
It's like, that's really not a good enough reason, is it? It's the randomness, I think you're right. Maybe that's what drew me in from the beginning.
And that they did it from like someone in his own family, his own community, his own
Right.
neighborhood. And Kenwood, where they're from in Chicago, not the south side of Chicago, it was the richest part of Chicago, so
Right.
wealthy. And just beautiful, giant stone mansions, like palaces.
Right.
And to do it right there. I mean, in some ways, the Jewish community was horrified, but in some ways, they were happy that he did it to another Jew, because it would have even been worse for all of them had he done a Goya.
No kidding, really?
Yeah.
Well, one of them was only
Sure.
half. One of them was a halfie.
That's right. That's Loeb.
Yeah, his mom was Catholic.
Right.
So he's
There's
high
that.
yellow.
That
He-
might
he
be the
passed.
reason right there it happened, right there.
Oh, yeah.
If he was all Jewish, maybe he would have stopped it.
It would have stopped,
No,
yeah. It's
probably
the
not.
Catholic part. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
The Jews generally don't do this sort of thing, do they?
The day
they
is young. You would never
Usually
know.
we're victims. We don't victimize others. We just want to get victimized,
When Paul came in, I introduced Belladonna Humphreys as our German Shepherd who hates Jews. And he said, you jumped on the Jew joke before I did. But she doesn't really hate Jews. She just hates dudes.
Well, I grew up, where just the word Jew is a punchline. But we're proud of it. And, you have to be a tribe member to be okay making that joke.
Right.
You were allowed to.
Oh, thank you.
But in the war, my dad actually was attacked by a German. He was in World War II, but it was a German Shepherd. He got bit. And it was American owned. So he
Right.
didn't get a Purple Heart, but he got really badly bit by a German Shepherd. So his whole life he was worried about German Shepherds.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
And
Germans in general did not like them.
I saw
He was
on...
a prison guard in France during World War II.
Oh, my God. I
So
saw...
he knew Nazis up close,
Yeah, no kid. Yeah, way closer than I'm sure he wanted. I saw on a comedy show, it was Key and Peele, and they were doing like a kind of a bad dog trainer sketch, and a German Shepherd is supposed to attack one of them who's got on like a big padded arm, and the German Shepherd attacks, and the dog trainer's right off camera, and he's like stop, and finally he just goes 9, and the German Shepherd let go, and they were like, oh shit, now shit got real. Shit got real. You have to yell 9.
Yeah.
I mean, way back in their little brain somewhere.
Well,
and
no,
It wasn't German's good for training.
They are
animals,
trained.
it's such a
German
scary
shepherds.
language.
Actually, I happen to know that most of the dog training places that train German shepherds train them in German with German commands.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I just thought that was really interesting and bizarre. I thought it was back in their, tiny little dog brain.
And that's kind of another strange connection with the whole thing, that these guys got into Nietzsche kind of before Hitler did, or maybe Hitler right around the same time was reading it.
Interesting.
But then that led to not a great thing during the Holocaust, but that these were
that whole era.
Jews getting into Nietzsche.
Yeah, that whole era is kind of, there was something bad floating around.
Yeah. That's why when my high school boyfriend really dug Nietzsche, I was like, I'm not sure this is going to work out so well. I'm not sure this is really...
It's kind of a boring writer. I've tried.
I thought it was
great reading.
Overwrought. Now it's turned into like Critics Corner. Okay, so so I am so grateful that you brought this case to my attention, because I feel like I know more about human beings and behavior in general, history, especially about a city as amazing as Chicago, but about, psychopaths. I really am grateful that you, at our little holiday gathering was like, oh my God, Leopold and Loeb. And I'm like, what is Paul talking about? This has been like such a fascinating, amazing journey for me.
It's probably the first time in my life I brought it up at a party when people aren't looking at that look like, I hope this is over soon, Oh, I gotta go get another beer. Excuse me. So I'm really happy because I love to talk about it, and it's fascinating. I'm so glad that you recognize why it, because I saw that look in your eyes when I started. It's like, I could do something in this century too, if you prefer. It is possible.
No, and I was like, huh. And then literally the minute I started looking at it, I was like, I am so fascinated, and I get utterly and completely why Paul was obsessed with this, because it is something to kind of obsess about. A pretty amazing thing that we'll never really know exactly what happened, but the stuff that we know, and I can't even believe the amount of research and time you've put into it, and your theories have now, I think probably years later, borne out to be what probably happened, and for the reasons why.
Yeah, that we're still not really sure.
Yeah.
And it really predated some of those big, celebrity murder trials that we had, recently with like the Menendez brothers. Kind of similar, these real privileged boys doing something that horrific.
Yeah, but this is, I
predated the Menendez.
Yeah, they sure were. Not brothers, but fascinating brothers in death, for sure.
So I'm going to do my producer's duty here and remind our audience that Paul Zollo is an author of 6 or 7. How many books have you written, Paul?
8 now.
8 now, including 2 books on songwriters, on songwriting, a book about Hollywood, which I think, Melissa, we ought to have Paul back to talk about maybe a murder or 2 in Hollywood. A lot of murder
and suicides in that book.
Yeah. And what? So where can our listeners find out more about you, sir?
Well, you can look me up on Wikipedia or Facebook, or my website is bluerailroad.com, which has got a lot of my writing and stuff there.
And it's PAULZOLLO. And he is an amazing creature, and you will be as fascinated with reading about him as he is about reading about Leopold and Loeb. And we are really grateful and blessed that you were here. Thank you so much for being here, Paul.
Thank you. This was more fun than I usually ever have, so I'm really happy to be here. Thank you both.
And more cowbell.
More cowbell.
And remember, if you've got a tip, give us a call at the Tipster hotline, 832-TIPSTER. That's area code 832-847-7837, or send us an email to jttipsters@gmail.com.